Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh, and welcome to Living the Line. Look, I got my face back, Sean.
Hey, your face is coming back. If you can't tell from the view here, we're about to do a tech video, and we're going to take a little break from our normally scheduled tech video to talk about an issue that some people have asked me about, and our patrons voted on, which, yes, we have a Patreon. Yes, we have patrons. And yes, they get to vote on stuff. They get to tell us what to do. So if you like these tech videos or if you like any other things that we're doing, please give us some money. Uh, let us know. That's part of how we know what to do and what types of things to produce is by, your guys' support and, encouragement. So we do appreciate that. Um, and
And our
so
patrons get all this stuff early for the most part. We get a backlog, they get everything. And then as I run out of a backlog, then they see it as they see it.
right.
But when like they're about to get like a good like 20 video dump right now. So that's another benefit.
You can be one of the many who is totally overwhelmed by the amount of content we're producing.
Yeah.
Um, so today we're going to be taking a look at lettering for comics. And, there are a lot of things that are sort of general tips that you can get for lettering comics. But I think that I wanted to share a few things that really, to me, make the difference between, lettering that looks is fine and things that look really, really snazzy. And most of these tips came from my friend David Lasky, who gave me some advice back when I was doing a ton of hand lettering, which was not very good. And David is an excellent hand letterer, and also advice that Carson and I got in very long, very eloquent, somewhat pointed faxes when we were working with Dave Sim on You Don't Know Jack, and telling to the title, Dave had some things to say about our Carson's lettering in particular.
Yeah.
we both
Well, I
we both
think
got it.
pointed was more of the right word rather than eloquent. Pointed.
Yeah, which is one
Yeah.
of the great things about working with Dave is that he tells you what he thinks very directly and communicates in a clear way, which I really appreciate. Um, so anyway, we've got a lot of things to say about digital lettering, and we're going to sort of talk about the things that you can do right now to take it from looking pretty good to looking really excellent. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a book called The Exile, which Living the Line is going to be putting out very soon. And are you seeing that on the screen, Carson?
Not yet. No.
Okay, let's see.
Share that
How
screen.
about now?
There we go.
Excellent. So here is a double page spread from The Exile, a book that Living the Line is going to be putting out in February by the great Eric Creek, who's a Dutch language illustrator and cartoonist. You might know him from, some of the books that he's done, like, the
Through the
Murder
pines.
Ballads, In the Pines, the Murder Ballads book that came out from Fantagraphics
In
in
the pines.
2015, um, and Gutsman. And so this is a book that he's described as his Viking Western, which I think is a really great shorthand for it. And so what you see right here is this is the sort of pre-lettering. So I put together a font that is based, I say based on, it's almost exact to the lettering of the Swedish hand letterer who worked on the Dutch language version of The Exile. I took that work and I built a font based on that gentleman's lettering, and then did a preliminary translation and text adaptation. And then Graham Miller, who works with me on some things, went through and did the placing of all of this into InDesign. And so we've actually made this with threaded text, which means that each of these balloons is actually connected to the one after it. And we did that so that we could just paste the entire document in, and each of these is sort of threaded to one of the other, the next ones. And he did sort of preliminary lettering. And so this is what I would say is fairly good placement, but this is not completed placement. So when you zoom in on this, one of the things that you can do to instantly make yourself a better letterer is to imagine that the white space around the text is an actual discrete element on the page. So Carson, like when you're looking at this one right here, do you see how this white space right here and this white space right here, this is a little thinner, this is a little larger, and you can see on the side here that the shape of it doesn't actually follow the shape of the balloon. So
Yeah.
those are things that are sort of subconsciously affecting how somebody takes in a page. And basically, the more you can make this letter shape the same as the balloon shape, and the more even you can make that white space around it, the more clean and communicative that lettering is subconsciously going to read. And so I've already selected the font here. I've already selected what's called the leading, which is the space between it. If you look up here on InDesign, you can see if I make the leading larger, the space increases.
Can you
For a
put the
font,
leading on automatic for a second?
oh,
So
yeah, you want to see it terrible? Yeah,
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things I learned from Dave is I just put in, whatever the font was and just typed and then
right,
did the bolds and stuff, but it never, like, I knew we were using the same font, but his stuff always looked better. And I'm like, well, I'm
right,
following exactly the words that he's doing in the order that he's doing them with the font size that he's doing them in. Like,
right.
what the hell's the difference? And one of the things that I had to learn about was the leading, and then also that he was messing with the kerning a
The
little bit, I
tracking,
believe.
yeah.
The
So
tracking, yeah.
yeah. So if you highlight all this right here, so InDesign gives you granular controls over all these things. So this right here is the tracking controls, and right now it's set to 0. I designed this font, so I knew how much spacing I wanted there to be between the letters. But you can make the tracking wider or narrower just by clicking this right here. And if you see that, if you get it wider, it makes a font have a sort of airier kind of feel to it. And if you make it narrower, it tightens it up. And so you can actually use this tracking to make something really, really congested if you want to. And you can also very lightly vary it in order to make certain lines a length that makes sense. But most of the time, what you want to do is figure out the tracking and size and leading for a project and then set it and forget it. And only do small adjustments to it. You really have to check these things too in print, especially when you're deciding the size of the font and the leading for it. But absolutely do not let yourself get sucked into having the default quote unquote auto leading. Chances are you're going to want something different, especially depending on the size. And so like a header, something that's going to be really, really large, you're going to want to end up to have the leading be smaller. Because if you think about it, the larger the letter is, the smaller the size should be. But in this case, we're talking about something slightly different because the designer, me, has already gone through and made the choices, and so now we're just sort of executing the choices. So in this case, we can just see, like, let's go ahead and correct this balloon. So we're gonna, this first line is too long because it's kind of crammed right onto the edge of the balloon. So I'm gonna hit return. I'm gonna go to this and I'm gonna combine these here. So we're already getting a significantly better effect here. So I'm gonna put this on the next line. And you can see that sometimes it starts to make decisions for you that you don't want. I just held shift, which makes it to the next line without adding a carriage return.
You don't just turn off hyphenate?
No, you might use it in some settings that might be appropriate. So yeah, that's not a bad idea though. So this is already better than it was, but this actually looks like too big of a gap to me. Does that look better to you?
Oh, that's way better. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So we can keep on plugging this or playing with this until we get something that we're really satisfied with. And, you can keep on doing the breaks differently and things like that. Maybe you find that this is good. Sometimes you find that this, whatever the last line is, has a little bit more weight. So it might even be a translation thing that was done to you, might feel more appropriate.
It's interesting because it's all in InDesign and connected like that. It can move into the other bubble.
Right. And so if you add an extra line, like we just done here, all you have to do is move it up in the position that you want. and then you move it down so that it makes the space integrated into this bubble.
Well, and
And
you
then,
have a particularly interesting challenge in this case because there's preset bubbles that you have to
yeah,
conform to, even though in the translation you may be winding up with significantly more or less characters.
yeah,
Um,
and that's not atypical for translated works. You know, this is just the reality of doing things from another language.
yeah.
You know, and you can change if your license allows you to. You know, you can change the artwork and make adjustments to that. But I think oftentimes you're best to just adjust your translation, and you know, you could just do word choice changes.
Yeah.
And so you get a range, you get an idea of the range of possibilities in terms of how you can break up a line like that. I'm not going to go into, you know, a huge amount of detail here because I
That
think
looks
that,
way better though.
yeah, I mean, this is significantly changed. So this document right here is the document that Graham sent me prior to me doing the final finessed lettering.
Yeah.
And so you get an idea of what it, you know, my aspect, or not my aspect, my portion of the project, what lettering, what it looked like. So I designed the font, I did the text adaptation in a Word document or a Notepad document, and then I sent it to Graham and told him, you know, where to put the stuff, and he put it in and did sort of rough conforming to the balloons, and then this is the last stage. And so same thing with that. I had several different ways I could break it, but I liked the idea of a lot more subtle, or if a lot more subtle, being on the same line.
Yeah.
So
And who was making the decisions about like bold and bold italics and those
uh,
kinds of?
I asked Graham to do that, following along with the original, so he got to see the Dutch language one right there
Okay.
next to it. So he did the first pass at that, and then when I was doing the finessing, I did a few more additional ones as well. So same thing right here. You might have thought that that placement was fine, but you got to look and see that white space around it and
Yeah.
really make it conform to that white space. And so, in fact, with this one right here, you know, it could be that having it be centered is actually not the best thing for it. So right now it's centered. Let's go ahead and make it left justified instead. And then I'll do this by hand. So that's very slight, but that's just slightly better.
Yeah. It gives a little dots, especially a little more room to breathe.
So they're not feeling like they're crunched right up against it right there. And so you can do the same thing. So this looks okay until you look at the white.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, hey, this is just not, you know, this is not optimal. And so it's not like, you know, you always know exactly what it is that you're going to do. You just sort of jog it around until you arrive at the thing that looks best. And only downside from doing this in InDesign is you really should do it from the front of the document to the back. Because, you know, you got to make sure that if you have the text all threaded together like this, that you don't accidentally move it in a way that, there we go. That is much better right there.
That threading of the text, I think, would be another good video because some people, I'm sure, are like, what? Like I know what text threading is, but I'm curious to see how you used it in terms of setting up the balloons and all of
Oh,
that.
oh, okay, good.
And how you had, I'm assuming Graham set up the document. So I'm assuming that he went and put frames over every word balloon.
He did. So what you do is you draw with the text tool, and then you paste in your text. In this case, we have Alice in Wonderland. And so you can adjust your thing to accommodate the bit of text that you want to have. So let's say this balloon is just this part right here. You do all the formatting that you want. So like, for instance, we're going to just make it centered. And that looks good. And then you get your selection tool, and you see this little thing here.
Mhm.
It looks like a little red
Yeah, plus
cross.
sign. Yeah.
You click that, and you drag your next balloon size, and it has the next portion of the text here. And so now you can adjust this any way that you want to. And drag it anywhere you want to, do anything you want. So this is essentially what Graham did. So Graham went through and did the first pass, and then when he got that one, he'd click on that plus sign again, and he'd make the next one.
Okay, that's what I felt like, because this is very different from how I do the lettering in Photoshop, which is
Yeah,
kind of just get the text tool, and because I don't put balloons in ahead of time usually, so I get the text looking like nice, and then I put a balloon behind it.
right.
I've used threading for like design stuff, but never for a comic. So I felt like that would be, people who are maybe doing lettering in a different program, this could be like, oh crap, I could have a whole Word document and do it this way.
Yes.
Like that would be
So,
instructive.
so much easier. I mean, it saves you hours and hours and hours of work. I think it's mostly just tradition that's kept people doing it in Illustrator. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do sound effects in InDesign, but as far as the body of the text goes, I mean, there's just no downside to it that I can see whatsoever. I mean, it's immensely useful, and you can still do the balloons after the fact. You just place it where you want to on the art. You print it out, and or do whatever your balloon stage is after the fact on the flattened text. But the thing about keeping it this way, where it's all live, is that I can make edits to this for a long time. So, this is sort of the last bit that somebody's going to, the last stage is making these text alterations. And we can keep on making those text alterations on the book up into the point that I'm ready to export it to the printer without ever having to open up a giant file and make a bunch of adjustments and things like that.
And you can wholesale, like say you wanted to change the lettering on the whole font, you can
Yep.
do it all at one go instead of having to go back and activate each text layer in Photoshop.
Exactly. Not only that, so like for instance, you were pointing out the version that I sent you of this book that there was a few issues with a few words where the tracking was too tight. And
Yeah.
that's because I actually fixed the font. As I was going, I would see issues with some of the kerning, and I would just go and make edits on the font and then save it and then reopen the document, and it'd all be fixed.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
So, since this is a fresh font, I just made it. Um, it really is. It really gives you a huge, versatility. And so here's something where I'm right on the fence about whether this is okay or not. Because you can see that like the white space that would be included is actually in the panel gutter
Yeah.
between the panels. I'm not really crazy about that. So I'm not sure if I fix this in my final thing, at least how it is currently, but I'm going to go ahead and fix it now or play with it now just so you can see
And the
what I
top
mean.
line is like difficult to tell whether it's hitting right on the panel border or a little bit under. It's like it's a tangent, it's a suggested
Right.
tangent, and your eyes trying to figure out if it's
Right.
hitting the border or over it, and that's just a bothersome. Yeah, that looks way better.
Way better. Still just a little tight on the could. So, if something like this really bothers you, what you can do, and so you can see that it bumped down the threading just a little bit. So I'm going to move this up until it fixes, and there you go. So same thing with this right here. I would probably fix that as well.
That's a difficult. You got to put the good up.
Yep.
Make those. Yeah. Make that bottom line smaller.
And so there's not always a great. So this is better. But I think survives. You might swap out the word survives. You could probably like if he lives, and then through. But once again, this is assuming that you are the text adapter as well as the letterer, and that's actually better, which I'm not actually positive. I think if that's, survives the night is cleaner.
John, do
So
you
anyway,
read Dutch? How did you?
yeah. So the Eric, the author, it, as excellent English. He did a literal translation, and then I did a text adaptation uh, from his literal translation, and also from the miracle of Google Translate for particular idioms and things like that. Yeah, so I mean, basically, the two of us did the translation. He did the bulk of the work, and then I did the adaptation of the text.
Awesome.
I think is how it's going to be credited. And so same with these kinds of things. You can just sort of do modifications until you have something that looks as good as it can be, given the balloons that you're presented with. And once again, this is probably not better than the previous one.
No. So you wouldn't. I think the reason that I've never done lettering in InDesign is the one time I tried it, I really had a hard time drawing balloons that I was happy with.
Yeah, but I would always do balloon by hand, and so I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean you could do it, but no, it would be cumbersome. Let's say.
Like you couldn't use the basically ellipse tool and pen tool in the same way that you would in Photoshop or
Uh,
Illustrator.
they have limited functionality, so you can use you can do basic ellipses. Um, you know, uh, I I don't particularly like that style in the first place, so maybe I'm not the best person to ask. But yeah, I mean, you know, this is a similar way to how you do it.
I would just use the ellipse tool, draw an ellipse, and then make a tail and merge the shapes, and then put like a stroke around it. It's probably not professional lettering at all.
you know, I find that especially with hand drawn artwork, I mean, I always want to see a hand drawn balloon anyway. So if this was part of my, as a cartoonist, this was part of my workflow, what I would probably do is put the text in and imagine the balloon shape, and then print it out without the image, and then hand draw the balloons and add them back in.
Gotcha.
But yeah, if you're doing the hand drawn, if you're doing the hand drawn balloons, it might be, or a photo, the balloons themselves at the same pass, then Photoshop might be a better option. Anyway, I'm doing this now reflexively, as if as if I haven't already finished this.
Yeah.
But I mean, is
That's
this,
why I'm distracting you with other.
right, is it helpful for you to see? I mean, are you seeing what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think well, I mean, from the fitting standpoint, yeah, like in terms of getting the words in there. What's most interesting to me is the thought that you could have everything linked, like as basically all one text document that's
Mm-hmm.
editable all at once. That I quite like, because the way I do it in Photoshop, it's like each on its own layer, and if I want to go change anything, I have to edit each balloon separately, and
Right.
that's a lot of work compared to just like select all, make it 7 point.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to do a lot of back and forth, which for is not ever that's not going to be everybody's workflow. But depending on the amount of back and forth there might be about the about the exact text, you know. So, for instance, I mean, Eric is the author. He is ultimately the person who's going to, as a person who can read English and write in English, he's going to be the one. If he has a line that he doesn't like the way that the final thing looks, I mean, he'll tell me and I'll change it. So,
Yeah.
making all of those changes directly in a Photoshop file that you have to open up can overwhelm you over time. Depending on what they actually are. Um,
Yeah, for people who don't understand InDesign, like the images aren't actually in there yet. These are just kind of placeholder. I mean, it looks to me like you have your preview set on a really nice resolution. It's not
Right.
blurry, but it's faster because it's just like almost
Mock-up.
a large thumbnail of the image that's saying when we
Mhm.
export, put the image here. It's not processing the whole image. It's just like causing a link that
Right.
links to a file. And that speeds up the processing quite a bit from like Photoshop.
And you can see how anal you can get about these modifications until you get the exact shape of the balloon, if you want to, if that's so desired, which oftentimes that is just the thing that's going to give you the cleanest kind of look.
Yeah. And then, I mean, something else that's why I asked is like, who's making the decisions on the where things are emphasized. I think that's like the other biggest thing that I took away from working with Dave. Not that I haven't noticed it, or especially his work is so full of emphasis and letter play anyways when he hand letters. But working with him and seeing him go back and like do this kind of stuff and modify text bits that I done made me way more aware of the sing-songy nature of where you choose to make like an italics versus a
Right.
bold italics.
Mm-hmm.
And that influenced me a lot moving forward, and I think made me a much better letterer.
Yeah, and in this case, I'm taking most of the cues from the original Dutch, which only lightly emphasizes certain words. But now that I'm looking at this right here, I would be, I'm pretty sure that I added more emphasis to the finished one, especially like her name, Olaf Flatnose. Here I became Un the Deep-Minded, and so, in addition to adding a hyphen to this, I probably made Un the Deep-Minded her name into a bold as well. So because I made this font myself, it's not actually like a style. I've got it as a separate font.
Yeah, you gotta do a separate font. I think that would also be, I know not in this video, but that's going to be another cool video, is how you made the font. I think that would be super helpful to a lot of people.
Guess what we're about to do, Carson?
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.